Hello students, welcome to Recitals in Depth. Herein, we will cover the international relations November 2024 current affairs topics in detail. The broader themes which are going to be covered are as follows: US presidential elections, economic crisis in Europe, soft power diplomacy, neighborhood issues, crisis in the Middle East, and diaspora related issues and opportunities. US cracks down on Indian companies for supplies to Russian firms. In the international relations between two nations, trade and economic relations hold a very key important point, right? And within those, sanctions, wherein there is some restriction on trade with respect to one nation on the another, is said to be a process in which the one nation who is presenting the sanctions is signaling to the other country that, look, we are not happy with what you are doing, and therefore we are trying to diverge this kind of trade interest and move it to somewhere else, right? So these are the concept of sanctions when it comes to trade and economic relations. In the same context, United States of America has sanctioned against some of the Indian entities. Okay, so there have been 400 Indian entities which have been sanctioned against by the United States, and these include some of the firms and individual entities as well. Okay, so let us delve into this issue and see how it affects the dynamics of India-US relations. So to understand the trade dynamics in the international relations between India and US, it is important to understand what is the concept which is related to sanctions. Okay, what are sanctions actually? Okay, sanctions are, as you might know, they are restriction. What are these restrictions on? These are restrictions on trade, investments, and financial operations. Okay. These are some restrictions that is posed by, suppose in this example, United States on the Indian entities. Okay. And what are they aimed to curb? They are aimed to curb any kind of access to resources of US. Okay. Along with that, the entities who are being sanctioned against by the United States, they are also being curbed with respect to their finances and operational needs. Right? So, what are sanctions? They are restriction on trade, investment and finances of a company, of an economic entity. And what do they curb? They curb the access to resources and the needs for being in relation with those entities by the sanctioning state, right? So what does it mean for the firms? For the firms against which the sanctions by the United States has taken place, the firms will now not be able to access US market. Okay? They will not be able to access the US market, that is, they won't be able to sell their products in the US market, right? The second thing is, they would not be able to get the inputs that is required for their business from the United States. Okay, so what is it going to do? It is going to affect their economic status, and global trade opportunities. Both of these are going to be affected, right? Because a major player is opting out of such kind of a trade relation with such kind of entities. So these sanctions mean a lot for the firms that they have been trading a lot with, right? Okay, now what are the different types of sanctions? Okay, in this particular case, we have seen that the sanctions are not against the Indian economy as a whole or an economic sector as a whole. Okay, it is with respect to certain entities, okay, certain firms, certain individuals. Okay, so in this context, one type of sanction can be comprehensive. Comprehensive sanctions occur when the country who is sanctioning against the other country, they want to place a complete embargo. For example, US placed an embargo on Cuba. Okay, these were comprehensive. That is, they are aimed at the whole economic sector. It is aimed at choking the nation's economy itself by opting out of any of the trade relations. Now, the other kind of sanctions can be against key sectors, or you could say firms or entities. Okay, and the present sanctions that US has against the Indian firms and the entities, it is with respect to this kind of sanction. Okay, it is not a comprehensive sanction against the Indian economy. And the reason is quite simple. The reason is that United States and India, they have been close partners. Okay, they have been major, US has designated India as a major defense partner. Okay. So what it does is, it does not want to go for a whole comprehensive sanction against Indian economy, okay, because it would be also against its interest in the Indo-Pacific area as well. Okay, it also partners with India in Quad. Okay, India and US also have 2+2 dialogue. Okay, that is between the Defense Minister and the External Affairs Ministry. Okay. Then what are the use of the sanctions? What are the use of the sanctions? The first is that when you place sanctions on some entities or individuals or firms, what happens is the population will face the brunt of it. Okay, so country A is in effect punishing country B, and the population of the country B will now coerce the government. They will try different types of protest, they will try different types of request, petitions, so that the country B, which is being sanctioned against, mends its ways and then adheres to what are the demands of the country A, right? Okay. One more utility is that it offers a middle path. Why are sanctions the middle path? I'll tell you, in the spectrum of dealing with trade relations or dealing with relations, international relations with a country as a whole, one could be that country A, which is sanctioning against country B, takes military action. Okay? They can take military action so that their forces are influenced, and therefore B will take actions according to the wishes of country A. Okay? Here comes in the very important concept of sovereignty. Because every country is sovereign, that is, they can decide for the matters on their own. They are not going to be influenced. They will try not to get influenced by the other countries. But in international relations, it rarely so happens. Okay, every country is a bit influenced by the decisions of the others as well, right? So, to get what they desire, if A is trying to get what they desire, they might go for military action. They might go for diplomatic measures. Okay? Or they might go for sanctions. Now, why sanctions are the middle path, I'll tell you. Because if you go for military action, then it is too much of a action that is A is taking. Okay, there is too much of economic cost for country A when it takes military action. Okay, it cannot go for an all-out war. Okay, it will face opposition from the other nations as well. Okay, then with respect to diplomatic measures, okay, constant high-level dialogues, high-level meetings, delegations which are sent, and they are also in talks. These dialogues can go on for a very, very long time, which would not be productive. This is said to be unproductive when it comes to economics in dealing with international relations, right? However, sanctions offer a very good way out of these two different actions, okay? So sanctions will help you to just tell the other country, that is, you can just signal to the other country that what you are doing with your economy, what your entities or your firms, your individuals are doing with respect to our trade, that is not being appreciated. So therefore, we want to stop this kind of a trade exchange between each of us, right? So sanctions offer a way out. And even within these sanctions, as we had read earlier, that there can be comprehensive sanctions also. Okay, US is not even going for comprehensive sanctions, because comprehensive sanctions mean complete cutoff of trade relations between the two countries, right? It is going for specific punishment to the individuals or the firms who it feels is a threat to their own trade relations and sovereignty of the United States, right? So this is the concept of sanctions when it comes to international relations. So now that we are reading about the international trade restrictions, that is through the sanctions method, then we should also know of the examples in where sanctions were imposed on India. When were the sanctions imposed on India? Okay, so if you remember from your history classes, it was during the nuclear tests. When India conducted nuclear tests, one was in 1974 and the other was in 1988. Okay, so India had to convince that these nuclear tests are not going to be proliferated. It is not going to go forward with giving this technology to other nations. Okay, there is a very important thing called non-proliferation treaty. Okay, it means that there should not be exchange of nuclear weapons and the transfer of technology related to it to the other nations as well. Okay, and because of that, there were sanctions placed on India in 1974 and 1988. In 1974, it was Canada that imposed sanctions, and it said that we are not going to give any kind of nuclear support or equipments to India. Okay, because they have conducted these nuclear tests. Now, the second sanction came in 1988 from the United States again, and this was again for the nuclear tests that were being conducted. However, they were lifted within a year, right? So these were the sanctions that we can quote as an example even in our mains answers, that India has faced such kind of sanctions in the past as well. Okay, then has India imposed any sanctions on the other countries? Yes, it has. Okay, between 1946 to 1993, it placed sanctions on South Africa. Okay, and why were these sanctions placed? The reason for that was apartheid. Okay, apartheid means that there would be racial segregation. That is, some of the racial groups will have more political and civil rights than the others. Okay, so this was something that was happening in South Africa, because of which India said that we are not going to trade with South Africa because they have this racial segregation in their place, right? The second was with respect to Fiji. Okay, again it was because of the deterioration of trade relations between the two nations, and a trade embargo was placed on the nation Fiji, right? In the recent times, you would have also heard with respect to China, there were banning of apps. Okay, can you remember some of the important examples of the mobile applications that China has and that was banned in India? You can write down in the comments box itself. Okay, so these are some of the sanctions that were placed by India on the other member nations. So now let us see if there is any possible impact on India because of the sanctions placed by the United States, right? So with respect to Indian defense sector, first, United States has said that we will not be exporting dual use items to Indian companies in which they have sanctioned against. Okay, what are dual use items? Those items which can be used for both civilian as well as military purposes. Okay, the reason for this is because Indian entities against whom the sanctions have been placed, they have been found that they have a role to play in the Ukraine conflict. Okay, so what they do is that they will buy the supplies from the United States and then resell them to the Russian firms. Okay, so because they want to avoid such kind of trade with Russian firms, that is why United States has placed the sanctions on these entities. So they have said that dual use items, we would be restricting the supply of such items which can be used for both of these purposes and in effect can fuel the conflict in Russia and Ukraine, right? Is it going to impact the defense sector a lot? It is expected that there would be minimal impact. Okay, with respect to sanctioned companies, okay, how many sanctioned companies? So out of them, there are two very important companies, and one particularly important is RRG Engineering. Okay, so they have also collaborated with the Indian Armed Forces and DRDO in the past, both Indian Armed Forces and DRDO. What they do is, they will supply the microelectronics as well as NBC warfare detectors. As well as microelectronics. They will source it from the United States and then they will further pass it on to the Russian firms. Okay, it has been seen such that they pass it on to the firms like Artex Limited. This is a Russian firm. Okay, and with respect to Indian Armed Forces and DRDO, the collaboration was quite limited. Okay, it wasn't as much as required to even destabilize the DRDO or Indian Armed Forces operations. It is not to that extent. It is just that they were supplying these microelectronics and NBC warfare detectors. NBC stands for nuclear, biological, chemical warfare detectors, right? So sanctioned entities, one is RRG Engineering. Okay, again, because of its limited collaboration with the Indian defense ecosystem, it is supposed to go for a very minimal kind of impact, right? The second is Denvas Services. Okay, so these provide digital kiosks. Okay, if you have been to the Connaught Place, you would have seen some kind of digital boards. Okay, so these are some functions, and this is the screen. This is a touch screen wherein you can find for places where you can find certain kinds of services that is available for the citizens. Okay, so these are kind of a digital kiosk. So Denvas Services also has these microelectronics which they serve to the Russian firms. Okay, a lot of the directors within this company are found to be Russian nationals. Okay, and therefore Denvas is also being sanctioned against, right? Okay, with respect to availability of equipment in India, that is, we are assessing what is the possible impact on India. So the first thing is that it is going to create a minimal impact on the Indian defense ecosystem. Why? Because the availability within India for microelectronics is abundant. Okay, that is, it can be sourced from within India and it can be sourced very, very easily. Okay, that is why the impact is said to be minimal. Okay, so this is the news about how US is sanctioning some of the Indian entities and the firms. However, what important is in the background is the signaling. Okay, the primary use of sanctions is with respect to signaling itself. Okay, that is, US wants to signal that we are not happy with what is happening between Russia and Ukraine. We are not happy with the conflict. We are not going to side with Russians. And even if we have friends, we have allies, we have friends like India, if they are having entities who are going forward and trading with Russia, and particularly in sensitive sectors like defense, if they are sourcing microelectronics from our firms and then passing it on to Russia, then it is time to punish those entities, and it is through by these sanctions. Okay, so signaling will require India or those entities to mend their ways and further go on so that they can collaborate with the US defense ecosystem as well. Okay, so this was the news about the Russian firms. India becomes top source of international students in the United States, surpassing China. With respect to your syllabus, that is in GS2 International Relations, you have Indian diaspora. Okay, and with respect to countries like United States, it is important to learn about the international students who are migrating from India to the US in search of better educational opportunities as well. Okay, so there has been an open door project or a report which has come up with the statistics of the international students, and particularly the Indian international students who are present in the United States, right? And so this would be a very important point in quoting in your mains answers, right? So let us see what the facts are. So this is the Open Doors report, and you can quote this report in your answers as well. So Indian students, it has been lately seen, as per this report, in 2023 to 24, in this year, nearly 29.4% of the total international students who are studying in the United States are Indian students. Okay? If we look at the numbers of how many international students are there in the United States, then the number is 11 lakhs. This means with respect to 29.4%, the Indian students will amount close to 3.3 lakhs. Okay. Now this is significant because it has happened for the first time in the last 15 years. Okay. From 2009 onwards till the present year, it was China that was leading. Okay. It was China that was leading with respect to the international students that go to study in the United States. But recently, it is India that has surpassed this figure as well. Okay, so 29.4%, and it has increased from about 25.6% to 29.4%. There has been an increase. Secondly, with respect to China, because there is an increase with respect to Indian international students in United States, therefore there would be a decrease in the percentage of Chinese students, right? But roughly you could say that both of these students roughly constitute 53% of the international students who go to the US to study there, right? So with respect to these international students, it is also important to know what is the stream of study. What are they going to study in United States? So it is seen that it is mostly concentrated to the STEM fields, that is science, technology, engineering and mathematics. Okay, mostly it is close to 43%. They are engaged with respect to computer science and mathematics. Okay, these are the fields that are quite often opted by the international Indian students in the United States, right? This can be very well quoted for your topics of brain drain, okay, or with respect to migration, or with respect to Indian diaspora. Okay, this can also be quoted in your social issues with respect to education. Okay, are we delivering the quality education that we aspire for in the sustainable developmental goals? Then why our students are moving outside the country in US so that they can pursue careers in the field of computer science and mathematics? Do we not have the faculties who are capable enough to retain such kind of brains, right? So these facts can be very well quoted there. Okay, it has also been observed that the programs, that is undergraduate and postgraduate programs, they have also seen an increase. That is, from the last year there has been 18% increase with respect to the postgraduate programs, that is people going for the masters in US, and undergraduate programs there has been 13% increase, right? So these are the facts which are related to Indian students in the United States. Another thing that you must correlate is with respect to Canada student direct stream visa. Okay, direct stream visa, which we had learned earlier in the recitals first part, we had seen that there are students who are being said to go forward with the regular route of opting for a visa and not under the SDS. Okay, they are discontinuing that for the international students, citing various kinds of issues with respect to housing, with respect to economic issues, and with respect to the public services as well. However, US has been particularly inviting. Okay, so the international students or the international educational opportunities for Indian students, if it is closing the doors with respect to Canada, the doors are opened with respect to the United States. So the universities in United States can also be opted by the Indian students, right? Now this is again one more fact that you should remember for your mains exam, is the economic contribution of Indian students. For example, we had quoted in the Canada part with respect to the SDS visa route, we had said that there is a huge amount of economic contribution. Whenever international students arrive in a country for educational opportunities, they are going to create some kind of living expenses. They are going to buy goods. They are going to lead to economic growth, right? More the demand, more the growth of the economy would be, right? So, economic contribution with respect to Indian students in United States, this is estimated at $50 billion. Okay, $50 billion, and it is mostly related to, majority of it, with respect to fees and with respect to living expenses. Right? And these are the two aspects as well. When you consider if Indian international students, or for that matter any student who is going abroad to study, they are going to consider both of these factors. Okay, only when they can pay it out of their pocket, or if they can have an educational loan available with them, that is when they are going to go to such kind of countries. Okay, when it becomes affordable for them, or they know that they can be repaid at a later date, right? So this is the economic contribution, and you can remember this fact for your exam as well. PM Modi's visit to Nigeria. So recently, Prime Minister Modi visited Nigeria, and this becomes an important part of our diplomacy. Why? Because we are trying to engage with an African nation. Okay, because we want to deal much more with respect to the African continent, because some of our neighbors, for example China, okay, we consider them to be one of our rivals when it comes to economic and trade relations. Even with respect to defense or strategic needs, we consider them our rival. Okay, so they have been founding their footprint in African continent more than Indian companies or the Indian companies or Indian government could, right? However, this visit therefore signifies a further step in this regard in engaging with the countries in the African continent. Okay, so let us see why is this significant. So with respect to significance or the visit, first what was held was delegation level talks between President Tinubu from Nigeria and the Prime Minister Modi. Okay, these talks were held, and also Prime Minister addressed the Indian diaspora present there. Okay, the reason why this kind of a visit is significant is because this is the first time after 2007 that an Indian Prime Minister has visited Nigeria, right? So it becomes very significant because of this event. And Prime Minister Modi was also awarded what? A national award. This is a very prestigious award that was awarded to the Indian Prime Minister, and therefore it becomes a significant event also. Other than that, why Nigeria is important? For one reason, it is the second largest economy of Africa. So it makes sense that we go for economic relations, trade relations, amplifying these kind of ties between both of India and Nigeria, so that we can deal with other African nations as well. Okay, so you can look from this map, $395 billion, okay, GDP of African countries in 2024. And the highest was in South Africa. South Africa, 401 billion. Where do we connect with South Africa? We do it in BRICS, okay, that is Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. Okay, these are the emerging economies, and therefore we deal with them in that grouping. With respect to Nigeria, we are furthering our step with this visit, and it is the second largest economy. Okay, it is also the most populous country. What does more population translate to? The more population will translate to more demand. Okay, so more demand will translate to market. Okay, so it is a very big market for Indian goods and services. That is, Indian companies can go there and establish themselves and create strong roots within those populations, right? Then PM was honored with the national award. This is the second thing. So this makes the visit even more significant when it comes to the Prime Minister's visit. Okay. Then 3 MOUs were signed between India and Nigeria. One was with respect to customs cooperation. Then cultural collaboration between the populations of India and Nigeria. And then survey collaboration. Okay, these were the memorandum of understanding that were signed between the two nations during this visit by the Prime Minister. Okay, now let us understand India and Nigeria's bilateral relationship. Okay, the first is with respect to strategic significance. Let us see what India and Nigeria have for each other to offer. First, Nigeria. It is a major oil supplier when it comes to the African continent. Okay. Second, India has a considerable experience when it comes to defense manufacturing. Okay. Third, with respect to specific economic sectors, there can be certain collaborations with respect to agriculture and industrialization. Nigeria has scope of further industrialization, and India can be very helpful in committing to that kind of a aspect. Okay, first is with respect to major oil supplier. Now India needs a stable supply of energy in the form of crude oil and natural gas. Okay, Nigeria being a major oil supplier can also dominate with respect to the trade between India and Nigeria, and rightly so. The exports from Nigeria, close to 70% of those exports are of oil itself. Okay, crude oil is being supplied to India. Therefore, there is strategic significance of this bilateral relationship between the two nations. The second is with respect to defense manufacturing. This is Nigeria here. This is the African continent. This is Nigeria. And you can see that it has a coastline. Therefore, it has vast amount of even land borders as well as maritime boundaries are there, which it needs to protect. Okay, it needs to secure itself. It needs to secure itself. And therefore, in this place, India's defense manufacturing experience can be very well utilized. The third is with respect to the economic sectors. Okay, with respect to agriculture, India is supporting modernization of agriculture. Okay, with respect to equipments, with respect to tools, with respect to agricultural extension or education. Okay, and it is also helping in food security. Okay, then with respect to industrialization, with respect to Indian companies, there have been joint ventures. So therefore, we can see with respect to energy needs, there is, when we count about the strategic significance, with respect to energy needs, there is a collaboration. With respect to defense manufacturing, there is again a requirement by Nigeria because of its location, and then because of its economic sectors, that is with respect to the welfare of its population, agriculture and industrialization. Okay, these are the ones that will create jobs. Okay, they are the ones that will create food security for the nation. So they are strategically tied to each other. Okay, and that is why this visit by the Prime Minister makes it even more significant. Historical ties. So both have been colonies in the past, both have been the victims of colonialism. Okay, 1947, India got its independence while Nigeria got it in 1960. Okay, in 1962, there was first contact, okay, between the Prime Minister of India, that is Prime Minister Nehru at that time, and Prime Minister of Nigeria at that time. Okay, and Nehru committed that we would be sending doctors, we would be sending experts, we would be sending technicians. Okay, we would be sending some resourceful persons who have knowledge, considerable knowledge about their own fields, so that Nigeria can also derive benefit from their expertise. And since then, they have grown their roots. Okay, the roots of such expertise, Indian expertise particularly, has grown, and it has fostered goodwill between the two nations. Okay, it has impacted on the solidarity and friendship between the two nations. Okay, so that is why the Indian-Nigeria bilateral relationship is strong, and therefore we also want the potential to be further expanded. Now coming to the next important aspect of bilateral trade between the two nations. Okay, so with respect to trade, India is Nigeria's second largest trading partner. Okay, with respect to India, Nigeria is the largest trading partner for India when it comes to Africa. Okay, amongst African nations, it is Nigeria which is at the top when it comes to trading with India. right? The second thing is, what is the trade amount? So between these nations, in the earlier year, in 2023-24, it was observed to be around $8 billion. Okay, and in the year before this, 2022-23, it was observed to be $14 billion. Okay, now you see why this visit becomes even more significant, because there has been a decline of nearly about 6 billion in respect to trade between these two countries, right? Between these two nations, there has been minus $6 billion. Okay, and why has this occurred? Has there been any flaws in the relationship between India and Nigeria? No. The problem is with respect to oil. You see, when it comes to imports from Nigeria, nearly 70% of the imports are in the oil sector. 70% of imports are crude oil when we import from Nigeria. That is the key import sector for us. Okay. But now, since the Russian-Ukraine conflict has started happening, we have started sourcing cheaper Russian oil. Okay. So we are also looking out for our own welfare, for our own developmental needs. And that is why we have moved to cheaper Russian oil, and therefore we have started sourcing it from Russia itself. Okay. That is why there has been decline in this trade. Right? With respect to the import and the export sectors, the key import sectors, as I have told you, it is with respect to oil, when it is imported from Nigeria. With respect to exports, it is mainly pharmaceuticals, agricultural machineries, and so on, right? Also, it is said that it is quite significant for Nigeria because Indian companies operate there. And it is said that Indian companies provide the second largest employment to the workforce. Second largest employment to the workforce, and that is after the Nigerian government itself. Okay. So it means that there is considerable amount of Indian businesses that are operating on Nigerian soil. Okay, so this is also a point wherein India and Nigeria want to collaborate together so that the things between the businesses as well as the governments smoothen out, right? So this is why the PM visit to Nigeria is very significant. Now, recently we have been hearing about the US presidential election, and we know about the election of Donald Trump as a future president of the United States for the next 4-year term. Okay, and in this news, he has nominated Dr. Jay Bhattacharya as the NIH, that is National Institute of Health Director. Okay, it is important and significant from the aspect of Indian diaspora who hold key significant positions in the countries abroad. Okay, particularly with respect to United States. Okay, so it is just important that for your knowledge, you should know what National Institute of Health is. So it is a set of first 27 premier institutes under it. Okay, and what does it study? It studies range from behavioral sciences, okay, women's health, okay, nutritional supplements, and so on. Okay, these are the things that NIH would study. It is also significant. Why? Because it is the largest public funder of biomedical research, not just in United States, but globally. Okay, that is, it receives a budget for $48 billion. This is annually, right? So this is quite a significant event that the helms of affairs when it comes to the public health is being given to a person from the Indian origin. Okay, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya is a person who has been a professor in Stanford. And secondly, he has also conducted various research studies based on the public health policies as well as the health of the vulnerable populations. Okay, it is important for us to mention in our answers. You may mention it as a point and also give these kind of examples when you're asked questions about Indian diaspora. Okay, in Indian diaspora, you now have two news. One is about the international students who have considerably increased over the last 15 years. Okay, that was with respect to the Indian international students studying in the United States universities. The second is with respect to the election of the new president and how he is open to having Indians, people of Indian origin as the key directors of the significant institutes in United States, right? So this becomes important for the questions on diaspora. US returns over 1400 antiquities to India. Okay, these antiquities have been a part of India's cultural heritage and they were stolen from India at some point of time. Okay, particularly the range of years is being said to be between 1960s and 1980s. Okay, from various places, from various temples. Okay, so now these have been stolen and it has been found in the United States, which now United States as a nation and as a friend of India, they want to return it to India so that the cultural heritage of India is being protected. Okay, so let us see what this is about. Now, what is the significance of this returning of antiquities by the United States? First is with respect to international cooperation, that it wants to protect the cultural heritage of various nations. Okay. Additionally, when it comes to international relations, this is also a step in strengthening the soft power diplomacy. This is only going to increase the goodwill that India and US have between each other, right? The second thing is, what was the value? It is said to be around 10 million. Okay. And it is said that there are more number of items that are going to be returned in the future. Close to 600 more additional pieces of artwork are going to be returned, and most of them were stolen from India in the 1960s and 1980s. All right. The second thing is returned items. Okay. What were the returned items? One was sandstone celestial dancer. This was stolen from a temple in Madhya Pradesh. Okay, this was during 1960s and it is being returned by the United States. The second thing is Tanesar Mother Goddess sculpture. Okay, this is in grace kissed sculpture, and this was stolen from Rajasthan in the 1980s. Okay, these were the significant ones. So you might get a question in prelims about these particular pieces of art, okay, that are being returned to India, right? Now, with respect to US-India cultural property agreement, okay, we have read about this before in the previous recitals as well. So, okay, so it was signed in July, according to which US has pledged that it will return all the items that were illicitly derived, okay, by way of trafficking or by way of stealing it. Okay, these are the methods in which these illicit items, which are importance of cultural heritage for India, and they are found in the United States. United States is willing to give it back to India, right, to restore the cultural heritage for India itself, right? So this is an important, significant event. Taliban appoints Ikramuddin Kamil as acting counsel. Okay, now with respect to Taliban, since the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan in 2021, the diplomatic talks have been broken down. Okay, India has gone forward and brought back all of its diplomats from Afghanistan, right? So basically there is no channel of communication between India and Afghanistan. And in this aspect, Taliban has gone forward and appointed this person, Ikramuddin Kamil, as the acting counsel. Okay, he would be the one who would be communicating with the Afghan nationals as well as people or the government of India, okay, on the behalf of Taliban. Now this appointment is significant because this is the first such appointment by Taliban since its takeover in 2021. Since the takeover of Afghanistan by Taliban, this is the first time they are trying to establish such kind of a communication channel. Okay, and Ikramuddin Kamil, he has been a beneficiary of Indian education system through MEA, Ministry of External Affairs scholarship. Okay, so he has been appointed as the acting counsel in the Afghan mission in Mumbai. Mission meaning that he would be the point of contact, right? So this is a significant event because they are trying to establish some form of communication with the Indian government. Now, what is the Indian response to it? India's response, firstly, we have not gone forward and issued any, there has not been any official response to this kind of appointment. No such response has been there, okay, officially. The second thing is, we have also not recognized Taliban as the legitimate ruler of Afghanistan people, right? As with other states also like United States, okay? The third thing is that India does want to engage with Taliban or whoever is the ruler of Afghanistan. It is within its aims why India wants to find a way in which it wants to go forward with Afghan-led, Afghan-owned and Afghan-controlled future. Okay, this was when Afghan government was in power, okay, through a legitimate election process. However, now since the Taliban has taken over in 2021, now it finds itself in a kind of a confusion, okay, of how to take things forward with an organization with like Taliban, okay, particularly because of its militant aspects. But with respect to Afghanistan, it has certain aspects which it definitely needs to put into place for the prosperous and peace and security in the region, right? And it also wants to avoid any kind of advantage that China and Pakistan can take with respect to the destabilization of Afghanistan and takeover by Taliban, right? So China and Pakistan, who are the rivals of India, they also would try to exploit the situation and turn Afghanistan against India, okay, which is particularly what India wants to avoid, okay. It does not want to let them get any kind of advantage from the destabilization of Afghanistan, okay. No such advantage India wants to give out, and therefore it would definitely find itself in a mix in which it will try to engage with Taliban at some point of time, maybe through individual aspect, maybe through a communication channel, or maybe through a set of nations, maybe through the support of nations within this region, maybe through Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Okay, so for now, this acting council that has been appointed by Taliban, this remains the point of contact, and we will see what happens and what develops in the coming days, right? So this was all for the recitals for November. I hope you learned something useful. Thank you so much.